Welcome to What's Your Signal, the podcast exploring the latest trends in enterprise technology, network security, and how we connect people, places, and things. You're joined by me, Taylor Walker, and my co-host, Mauricio Stefan. Hello, Mauricio.
Hi, Taylor. How's it hanging?
Oh, good. I'm pleased to see you here because I know you have a bit of a commute to get to the office. Do you have an electric vehicle, or have you considered getting one?
I've actually considered one. I think it's, especially if you're just commuting to and from the office, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I know, gas is getting expensive. There are definite alternatives to, having to pay for electricity, right? I have solar at my house, so, it kind of makes sense, especially if I was commuting to the office more often than not. But it's one of those things that I just continue to look at to see how it'll work out for me.
I did read an article on Bloomberg recently that said that by the end of last year, 31 countries had surpassed what's become a pivotal EV tipping point. So that's when 5% of new car sales are purely electric. And so this threshold is really a signal to the start of mass adoption. And that's usually when technological preferences start to really flip at a pretty rapid pace. And this is an important milestone for OEMs especially, who are building and maintaining electric vehicles and their charging stations, and they have to expand just as quickly, which isn't always easy.
Yeah, I think, going back to your question, right, whether I've considered an electric vehicle, I think that's one of the things that has been a barrier to people switching to electric vehicles is the different charging standards and different port types, right? Harkening back to as you like to point out, I'm from the Stone Age, harkening back to, Betamax.
I said it once, one time.
But I mean, there's definitely been, times where technology, is a this or that kind of thing, right? Betamax versus VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, WiMAX, LTE. And I think that's been kind of one of the barriers of people going to electric vehicles is depending on which brand of vehicle you choose, those are the chargers that you can use. Or, here's where I poke you a little bit. Being an Apple user, you have to carry a whole bunch of adapters. Well, in the electrical vehicle space, you have to do that. Now there seems to be the industry rallying around one charging port and technology, which I think will help in people adopting electric vehicles, because then it doesn't matter whether you pick a Ford or a Tesla or a Toyota. You will have access without obstacle to a large charging network and not have to worry about that charge anxiety.
As of February of this year, 2024, there's more than 61,000 publicly accessible electric vehicle charging stations, but those are with level 2 or DC fast chargers, and that's in the US, and we're going to talk more about what that means. But that is, almost double what it was in 2020. And for reference, there's about 145,000 gas stations in the U.S. And so, that the electric vehicle charging station growth is pretty visible. And today we're really diving into those commercial charging stations and how they're connected and how they're secured, and the impact that it has on that industry. So please welcome back from Core Wireless, a guest of the show before, VP of Managed Services and High Bandwidth, Jeff Noska. And with us for the first time, Ericsson VP of Global OEM and Embedded Sales, Jonathan Fisher. Well, Jeff, I want to get a lay of the land for our listeners who may not be as familiar. Can you tell us a little bit about EV architecture? Jeff, let's start with you. So when we're talking about charging stations, what are they? How do they work? What are we referencing here?
Sure. And I'll maybe skip past the what an EV station is, because I think most of us have seen the news or at least something along those lines. But yeah, it's actually a really complex solution that's weaved together. So that way, when you pull up with your car, you can actually charge, right? The things that blow me away with it, and having worked with these companies, is just the amount of power that it takes to actually charge a car, especially when you start talking about fast chargers. And I'm sure we'll talk about that stuff a little bit later. But all of the coordination that has to happen, power lines that have to be laid, the infrastructure that has to be put into place. The regulatory issues, all of that stuff has to be worked out. The planning and design usually is years, not months, to like get everything laid out and to figure out where something's going to actually be implemented. Again, talking about the higher end chargers here. And coordinating all of that, getting all of the permits, all of that stuff working. And then the fun begins of actually installing an EV charger, right? So at that point, you have many different types of manufacturers. Many of the ones you see that are branded are outsourced. Many companies build their own from scratch, have very robust engineering and in-house engineering solutions for all of the hardware that actually does the charging, combined with the software that runs on that charger to give the best user experience, how it pairs with the car, how it pairs with payments, communications to the network, and then obviously all of the cloud infrastructure that exists on the top end to validate that you have a subscription to this type of charger or that you got your free charging, and all of the different things that have to be taken account in the cloud. And pulling all of those things together is kind of everything in a nutshell.
What are the different types of charging stations? So when, like you mentioned, fast charging, and are there different ones that we need to know about for this conversation or to better understand the types of chargers?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. So I would say that it's probably, it's all about how much power can you get to that particular site, right? And it's all about kilowatt power. So you could have your home, right, which is, typically 200 amp service coming in. You might be able to get typically 6 miles of additional capacity every hour from a charger that's going to get you that 30, maybe 50 amps worth of charge. And then you go to the more public chargers, smaller ones, 50 amp, 100 amp, or kilowatt amp, and more, right? So you can get up to like 350 kilowatt chargers. Typically, those are the Tesla superchargers, and you can get, an entire charge in perhaps 30 to 40 minutes. You can get maybe 200 miles out of one of those 350 kilowatt ones. So yeah, those are. It's really about power, and then some of the other connectivity that you can get out of those chargers as well.
Yeah, and John, something that blows me away, like just in working, newer to this industry, right? From my background, is the amount of 600 amps to power a charger, like just ridiculous amounts of power.
Yeah.
All of the safety stuff that goes into account with the level 3 or DC fast chargers. Both terms are kind of used interchangeably. The fact that the cable that you're plugging into your car is actually liquid cooled inside the cable because there's so much energy going through. Things that you don't even think about that are going on inside of those machines to get that much power to your car to charge. And then the next gen stuff, they're looking at 15, 20-minute charges at even more power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lithium battery that's, it's equated to like a parking lot, right? When you first get to the lot, you can find a spot easily, right? As the lot starts to fill up, as the battery starts to fill up, those spots where you can park start to become a lot less, right? And so you got to hunt around and get those cars in there. So when you get to about 80% of the battery, that rapid charging really starts to slow down, right? So you get to 80%, and now that last 20% takes just as much time as the first 80%, if not longer, to fill that battery up. And so and you don't really want to continue to like not charge all the way to the top, because it's not so much as bad as the older style batteries, but it will have some impact on the longevity and the effectiveness of your battery over time. So, getting a quick charge, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, not necessarily the best thing for the battery long term. But you gotta find those quick charges. I have a pretty anecdotal story that happened to me in Pittsburgh when I went to go visit my family. My wife and I decided, we're going to give this EV charger or this EV car a shot. So we got a Q4 Audi e-tronic, drove it all day, went to the in-laws' house, stayed there. We plugged it into the wall. We got our 20 miles overnight, which wasn't much. And the next night we're going out with some friends. So we went to a restaurant downtown Pittsburgh and we plugged into one of the superchargers. Like, oh, this would be great. We'll be in dinner for a couple hours. We'll be all set to get the car and drive back to the in-laws, which is from the city all the way out to Washington, and about 45 miles, and come out to find that it hadn't charged. So we're in a little bit of a panic. We had 18 miles left of range, and it's 10 o'clock at night. And so we start searching for a new place, or like my friends are looking, my wife's looking, and it's like, we tried the Audi app that's in the car. We tried Charge Hub, Charge Finder, couldn't find anything really close by. And then we ended up finding a station of promise, 60 kilowatt, right? And it's kind of like just a little bit more than what you get at your house. We got there, it delivered 7 kilowatts. So basically the little charge thing came up on the screen and said, oh yeah, your car will be charged sometime next week. So we drove around a couple more areas, went to a station that supposedly had 150 kilowatts. And despite trying my credit card, my Apple Pay, my wife's credit cards, my friends' credit cards, nothing would work. So we're now at 11 miles. We really start to panic. I found a 50 kilowatt charger that failed. And finally, we got another 5 miles away. We got to an EVgo charge site and got about 60 minutes of charge and got we got 60 miles out of a 60-minute charge, and got back to the house, put it back on the charger, and really prayed that we would make it to the airport the next morning for our 8 a.m. flight. We did, but I got to tell you that's very frustrating, and it certainly wasn't how I wanted to spend my last evening with my friends going to find a charging station. So,
John, were you doing the same thing that I do? Like if I'm running out of gas, you start to think that other things in your car will consolidate your mileage.
You
so you're like, yeah, you turn off the AC, you turn the radio down. Yeah, everything will stay.
You coast.
Yep, exactly. You're like Flintstoning it.
We've done all that in our days, right?
That's
absolutely.
So funny.
I think it was the middle of summer too, so it was hot.
Oh gosh,
turn off the air conditioner. All these things definitely eat away at the charge. So,
well, you're bringing up a really good point, though. Is I think there's a couple of hurdles right now with EV charging stations. One of them being accessibility, and one of them being reliability. So, I would love to hear more about, like, let's talk about the accessibility issue. So finding stations. What are some of these OEMs and charging companies doing to help improve accessibility for charging stations?
Yeah, I think something there is, obviously building them out, right? Like something that I don't think most people understand is how expensive it is to install, especially, level 2s are expensive. Level 3s, the fast chargers, they're incredibly expensive. You're pulling in more energy into an EV charger than most businesses. You start talking about the power consumptions of manufacturing plants, right? For 5 car stalls, right? That can all be used at the same time. And so a big piece of the accessibility is just what I was talking about earlier, that like upfront building and getting through regulations and where can you install and getting lines ran, right? Like there's a lot of gas stations, as an example, that are installing EV chargers now, but now they have to lay lines where they have gas tanks nearby, right? And you have to start thinking about those types of things to get that type of power. The infrastructure doesn't exist for those high-powered chargers anywhere just sitting there, right? Like it's something that has to be really well thought out. And so the build out phase is always going to be slow.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that some of the things they're also doing is, the apps, the apps on your phone. Like we tried to use the apps in the vehicles themselves that say, hey, here are the closest ones. The problem is, and I've heard this from a lot of other folks, is the reliability of the information they're receiving back from those stations is not great. I've read a few articles. In fact, I've reached out to a few of these companies myself to say, hey, maybe we can help you out. But, the reliability of whether or not the application is giving you good data is a bit of it puts you in a panic. And I think about, my wife trying to, get to work or come back from an airport or whatever. And she's like, oh, I just got to grab a charge here. Well, you miss your flight or you get stuck somewhere, right? I mean, that's pretty scary stuff. So you got to have that reliability. And so that information has got to come from that charger to the cloud, to an application, to the user, and it's got to be reliable, right? And that just hasn't, in my mind, hasn't gotten to be as reliable as we'd like it to be. And so there's a lot of reasons why, right? It could be the power lines that they laid across that Jeff just talked about are down or diminished capacity because there's now 9 vehicles there trying to feed off of that one 350 kilowatt line that's coming in there. If it's maybe just one car, maybe they get the whole 350, but if it's 9 cars, maybe they only get 30 kilowatts each, right? And so that has got to be given, to the user real time. The other is the issue we're preparing for this, started reading about people just showing up at different locations to charge, and that charger just being completely down, right? Not even online whatsoever. And so that connected charger really failed to tell that user, go to another place because this is not your not the place to go to.
Yeah, and John, I want to just say, like, where we see the biggest challenge here is, and obviously where we both play every day, is really in that connectivity side, right? Like it can be incredibly reliable, but most implementations haven't been. I mean, it's one of the things that we've seen is in the quest to grow quickly, assumptions and shortcuts have been made, right? Like, every time we pick up our phone, it just works, right? Like it always works. And when it doesn't work, we don't even think much about it, right? Like we don't think about the fact that, oh, we need to reset our phone or whatever. We just do it. We don't think about those sorts of things. You start deploying thousands of devices, tens of thousands of locations, things like that, and you start having a 1, 2, 3% fail rate. Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
And what we've seen a lot of folks do is, buy something that's off the shelf, even a high-end device that's off the shelf that they don't manage, buying a low-end device because cellular, right? It's all the same. It all works. Most EV chargers are cellular connected. Some have hard lines. Sometimes that works, but it's hard enough to get the power to get telecom out to those locations. And there's an assumption that, that again, back to like what I said, cellular just works, but cellular doesn't just work. It takes so much work to make that connectivity actually work right. People who they work with a contract manufacturer and the contract manufacturer says, oh yeah, we've got that figured out. We know how to make that work. They use the cheapest components. They don't keep it up to date. They don't communicate with the EV charging manufacturer on firmware updates. When a carrier makes a change and the firmware needs to be changed, none of that actually gets updated in the system. And so you start seeing over time that when you deploy something that's brand new, it's the uptime's really good, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, and we're in that phase now, right? 5, 10 years down the road with a lot of these chargers, they're down because the cellular's not staying up.
Yeah.
Because of whatever choices were made or the lack of management or something like that. And right now with many of our EV charging customers, we're seeing that is really coming to a head now, especially with the transformation of 5G and all the carrier changes that they're making for 5G. And there's this assumption, right, that, well, I'm not using 5G, right? They just need to say, hey, I'm up, and hey, process this credit card, right? LTE is fine. But the carriers are making massive changes for 5G, which are affecting the firmware and the way that modems talk to the networks, that all of the good chipset manufacturers, the good hardware manufacturers are staying on top of that. But maybe the manufacturer doesn't have the tools for the end users to properly update their stuff. And then the in-house people who have done that work, they're not even thinking about that. And so they just see that their uptime just goes down over time. And a lot of that is just the connectivity piece. To your point earlier, you're saying sometimes the charging stations are down and they're hard down. Well, they don't actually know that the charger is down to the point that they can actually go and send somebody to go fix it. because something, when you pull up to it, it's down. It doesn't work, either doesn't charge, there's no power to it, there's nothing like that. But there's some computer on the back end that's still saying, hey, I'm up every 10 minutes, and that much still works, but it's not enough to actually know where the issues are inside the device. So a lot of these manufacturers don't even know that their devices are down until they start getting calls or reports or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost need, and it's an afterthought for sure, right? They're really good at building these very high end chargers. They understand gauges of wire that they need. They understand the liquid cooling that you brought up, Jeff, but they really don't understand networking, right? And so you need to create an environment for these companies to be able to adopt cellular technologies, cellular connectivity, cellular reliability, cellular security, in a way that's easy for them to adopt, just like they know the rest of their gear, and future proof it. I think that's an interesting observation too, because we are at that 4 and 5 year mark where most of this gear is sitting out in a stainless steel box, either getting rained on, snowed on, or if you're like me in Florida and it's 105 degrees in the shade, just the overall heating of these devices up, and they start to fail. So you really need to have something that's ruggedized, meant to be used in an environment like that. Then I would say the next is really that the creating a network, right? So if I have thousands of these chargers, right, a network of chargers that I know where they are, how they're operating, I know if they're up or not up. That the cellular device itself is starting to report back if it's up or down, because then I can know that the charger is also down. APIs that allow me to pull that into my centralized charger management solution, right? So I can say, oh, I'm getting a GPS out of the cellular device. I'm getting this information that's GPIO based, connections to the charger itself. All these different things that I can now get through both connection and out of band management. Maybe I need to push firmware to the charger itself, right? I need to push down new firmware to my charger that I manufacture out there, right? So this whole ability to have like software defined networking or zero trust capabilities, where, hey, listen, this is also a nice area for a hacker to get into, perhaps to push code to that vehicle, right? Because not only are they getting a charge, I know a lot of these companies are now using that charger to push firmware onto the vehicle, right? What if I put a little piece of malware into that firmware and cause that self-driving vehicle maybe not to react the way it's supposed to? There's a lot of reasons why, not just the connectivity, but also the security and the SD-WAN manageability, the API based single pane of glass capabilities as well, I think make their reliability, make their reputation as a provider even better, right? If you went to the gas station and were out of gas every time, would you go to them anymore? No. we come to think that this is a different technology in a different world, but at the end of the day, it's all about getting from point A to B, right? If I can't do that reliably, then I'm going to figure out another way to do that.
Yeah, and something I find with these EV charging firms is they have brilliant software people, because they figured out ways. I mean, you look at some of the solutions and the way that you pull up to the charger, it already knows your car, it processes your payments through the apps. The user experience on every charger is the same. Your user experience in the car is the same. Right? Some of these solutions can be incredibly seamless. The software people are incredible. And as you said earlier, the hardware people, the people who actually understand how a charger works, the firmware, everything that's powering it, really top talent with that. Yeah. But as you said earlier, that networking piece, that gets forgotten about because that's its own skill set. And it's not near as sexy of a job anymore, right? Networking has been around for 40 years, right? Everything's in software, and then still a lot in firmware and how devices work, and that networking piece. And then once we start talking about cellular, as you know all too well, is it's not the same as Wi-Fi or fiber or other things, right? There's a lot of nuances and how to make that actually work and the things you need to think about as you're building a robust solution. And so we see a lot of the times, I mean, honestly, somebody who's formerly worked for a Wi-Fi company or did some networking here, they get kind of pulled into, and now they own that cellular piece, right? And so what I think is just key here is partnership, but with the right partners, right? Because I think the carriers are doing this, the hardware manufacturers are doing this, a lot of the contract manufacturers who are building the chargers and stuff like that to engineering specs, they're saying things like, oh yeah, we absolutely know how to do that. And so when you're choosing those right partners, one, you got to have the right partner, but two, you need to validate that they really know what they're doing. Shop that around. Something I always recommend every customer to do, not just in EV charging, but in other places, is find a managed service provider who actually does that every day. Talk to two of them. Even if you're going to do everything in-house, right? Even if you're going to do everything in-house, they're going to ask questions about things you were never even thinking about. They're going to say things in a discovery call with one of their solutions people, and they're going to ask you a question that you didn't even think to ask because they do it every day for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different devices and hundreds of customers. And it can really be enlightening. And then you can make the choice whether you actually want to go with a managed service provider, but like just having that conversation that helps you learn your unknown unknowns, right? Like there's just so many things that we don't even know that we don't know. And this is true for all of us, right? But when it comes to cellular networking, I think it's vital to talk to somebody who's in that industry, who understands that and who actually does that work every day. Because a lot of that best talent in the cellular world, that's where they're working, right? They don't go and work for a single company because that limits their career paths, right? The best cellular networking people in the world work for companies like yourself or our company or other providers in the field. They don't go and work for a firm where there's 3 people on a team, right? Like the best people are working for these managed service providers and technology providers. Have conversations with those folks and understand how would they do it if they did it for you. And then you can make those decisions of whether you go that route. If nothing else, it can really expose what you don't know.
What would you say are some of those key questions? Like if you had to say maybe 3 to 5 of the top questions for a manufacturer to really ask as they're building out either new charging sites or even as they're looking to upgrade their current ones, what should be like their top of mind questions, like their must know things that they're figuring out before executing on that plan?
Yeah, I think with EV charging in particular is who's going to own the cellular connectivity piece. There's not a single EV charger that I'm aware of that's in any scale that doesn't have extensive cellular solutions in place, even if it's just a backup, right? But most of them are using it as a primary for many of their charges, if not the vast majority. And so who internally is actually going to own that and what are their expertise? I think that can be as eye-opening as, oh, we hadn't even thought about that, which we hear a lot, right? Because it just works. Why do we need somebody? The next thing is how are you going to manage your solution long-term? So when you have 10,000 chargers out there, 50,000 chargers out there, how are you going to manage the connectivity of that fleet? Who owns that internally? And where are you getting the information that if you're going to design your own solution because you want to have really unique packaging and so you have to build it all from scratch, right? Are the people that owns that hardware side, the connectivity side, and then the firmware software side? And how are you going to manage that in the long term? Are you going to keep things up to date? What is your knock escalations when a charger's down, when there's something going on, right? Like it's who owns that, and then what are their expertise in actually supporting that from a long-term basis? I think those are the 2 critical ones that are always top of mind for me. And then there's obviously the questions of build versus buy and all of that sort of stuff, comes into play as well.
Yeah, Jeff, I would add to that one big thing, right? Which is, what is the cost of rolling a truck to go and fix or look at a charging station that may be up, maybe down? That you couldn't manage remotely through some type of out-of-band management capability or some environmental capabilities that would be done through the cellular modem, right? So instead of just saying, "Hey, we'll just throw a modem at it. It's cheap. We'll put a a puck inside of it, that's plug in the Ethernet cable, and that's just how it works. Because it's cheap, it's cheerful, right? Well, what if I could save $1,000 truck roll, because it's about on average what it's going to cost to roll a truck to that station to figure out what's going on with it? What if I could remotely manage, reboot, control, operate that charger, because I have full capabilities over the cellular network to do that? I think that's a big one, because then it goes right to your knock, right? What can the knock really see about what's going on in that charger? What can the knock really impact remotely on that charger? Can they send a reboot to it? Do I build in true kind of a breaker infrastructure into it, so that I can hit a button and then actually throw a breaker and then reset that, because this is large amperage electricity coming through there, right? So the things that you can do when they're building these chargers that you can now manage and operate remotely, they need to start building into them, so they don't have to roll that truck. Because if you can save that money, you have to roll 3 trucks and spend $3,000 just doing that. What if I would have put $3,000 extra into that charger and ensure that I can do all that remotely? Because that fourth time, now I've already made up the money in managing that, right?
Yeah, and one of the questions I still always ask, just to make sure we're on the same page, but like it's clear that in the past it was something that they were like, I haven't really thought about that. This isn't the problem anymore. It's how important is uptime, right? Well, right now it's everything, right? Because everybody is feeling the pain of downtime and not thinking through it. And that's really shifted the conversation, especially when you start talking about, level 2 and especially the level 3 charging stations, to mitigate everything you were talking about, John, earlier, that you ran into and all the problems you personally had, right? Is uptime is everything. And when it's like, well, what if you spent an extra $1,000 and didn't have to worry about uptime? Yeah, where, how, when, right? Like that's where the conversations are today. And we're talking about, tens of thousands of dollars per charger anyway. What are some of those extra things that you can do to have that uptime from that upfront piece, right? And then also, like on the connectivity side, every carrier is going to fail at some point somewhere, right? If nothing else, a tornado is going to hit a cell site, right? Like it's going to happen. There's going to be outages for one reason or another. So what are you doing to build in that type of redundancy, right? And for certain types of stations, that can be hardware redundancy, where you have multiple things connected together. But also, with the right hardware and the right choices made, you can always have that cellular redundancy. So if there's a problem with one network, it picks up a different network and just keeps going along. And those conversations have actually been very easy in the last year because of that. The cost of the uptime is not just that truck roll, but it's your contracts. You're guaranteeing uptime, whether it's government subsidies, which still play a role, but also when you are, it's not just your reputation, it's the reputation of the person who chose you, right? If I'm putting one in a big box warehouse club or whatever, right? And somebody's like, hey, I'm going to go do my shopping and charge my car when I'm buying groceries, and that charger's down, that customer now isn't going to the manufacturer of that charger. They're going to the retailer and saying, hey, why is this charger down? So it's not just your reputation, which is obviously critical. It's also the reputation of your customers. And here's the other thing, right? The big piece is customers are paying for this electricity. So like, what is the revenue you lose for every hour of downtime? It makes that $1,000 look tiny.
Yeah. And not only that, but they're like an Uber driver. You're just able to go in there and give it 0 stars review. So now that's what we were doing. We were looking at the app going, oh, this has got a 1 star. That's not going to be any good. It might be a good charger now, but it's gotten 10 1-star reviews on it. And now that anchor, right? We're talking about like charging locations, like in retail partnerships and restaurants and cafe integrations and those types of things. And no longer they want those chargers in their parking lots because it's impacting their business. They're the ones getting the black eye for it because that's not operational.
it all begins with what that customer experience they want to deliver on, because just like you mentioned, John, is like the customer is just trying to get from point A to point B. And, that will be influenced by what chargers are available and what's along their route, and choosing potentially that partner, that restaurant, that cafe, that store. They may choose to go to a different one because the charger may or may not work. So I think it all starts with like the charging company need to think about what is that customer experience that they want to deliver, or that customer experience that they're being contracted to deliver based on their, let's call them their host, wants to deliver for their customers. Because if they're not living up to that, then it's causing again issues for that host of the charger.
Yeah, and amenities, right? Maybe they're going to offer Wi-Fi or restrooms, vending machines. Maybe you have some type of entertainment that is there, movies and those types of things that you could maybe stream, to your vehicle. But, listen, I'm not all the way there on this full electric vehicle. I would go 100% hybrid, but at the end of the day, a half an hour for me to charge my car is a lot of time, right? And so having that reliability is absolutely critical. Having that high speed level 3 or whatever it is, Jeff, that you're talking about, and I can get it, done in maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, absolutely critical. I just know how my life is and how everybody else's life is probably just, that time is critical, right? And so if it's not working or it doesn't have the right amenities or it's just not reliable, it's not something that can be easily sold to people, even though maybe it's a green alternative, but maybe it's just not ready for prime time.
Well, and John, I'll just say, like, working with these companies, like, they are acutely aware of everything you just said. And like the good news is they're taking it very, very seriously. Like the amount of intensity that exists in this world right now from an uptime perspective is massive, and they're looking at everything: their software stack, the cellular connectivity, their hardware engineering. They're looking at everything. What is every little piece that we can do? And the good news is that a lot of messaging that I think both of us on this call today have been preaching for a long time is starting to really be listened to. A good news story, right? Like working with one customer, and they had a very particular metric that was key for uptime measurement. By going in and properly configuring their devices, their failure rate dropped by 75%. Doing updates, changing it, right? Like their failure rates, that is massive. You have 75% less downtime because the devices are now properly being managed, right? That's a good news story because that was something that was able to be done over the course of like a month, right? There's others that, the other question that you asked earlier, Taylor, what questions we would ask. The other one is where do you want to deploy these, right? So you start talking about international. Now you have to start taking a lot more things into account, right? What do the networks look like on those international players? What devices are you going to use? I'll leave out any particular technologies, but going with very specific technologies that do not have widespread adoption internationally, but they work great in the US, maybe great in Europe, but the rest of the world hasn't adopted yet, and they're a great low-cost option. They're not a great low-cost option when they don't work in another country, and they don't realize that until they're having to put people in planes and fly them to places to make updates, but they've already built their housing and their mounts for this other solution, and they have to spend a month just to figure out how to retrofit and pass. And then it's like, okay, so does this country require FCC type certifications? Because if we make this change, then now we've broken our certification, but it's down now, right? Like avoiding those conversations avoiding those problems in the long term by thinking through on the front end, how are you going to deploy? When you make the wrong hardware choices in particular, and sometimes the wrong carrier choices, like those are things that are almost impossible to fix, more like that good news story where you can reduce your downtime, right? Like that now becomes, what's our next generation charger and how is it going to be different? And then how are we going to get rid of the ones that are down 5% of the time every month, right? Like making all of that wise choices on the front end. But again, the good news is that the providers have taken this very, very seriously. And as a recipient of a lot of that intensity, I'm actually really encouraged by that to help solve the consumer confidence.
I appreciate that. Yeah, maybe it talks me into getting all the way over to that electric side, but right now, I think we still have a long way to go. So, hoping us here can influence that in a positive way.
Even with that long runway ahead, what do you guys see on the horizon as maybe the next? I don't know if it'll be like the next big thing in EV charging, but maybe the next set of improvements that we can really expect to see, or are there like new amenities that manufacturers are trying to add into their charging stations, or like what do you see is on the horizon, or what's coming for this industry?
What I see is actually none of those things, and it's all about improving reliability. Because if you have great amenity and all of those things, like, right, like the ability to, whether it's watch a movie or charge more quickly, right, to get a lot more of the DC fast chargers out there that can charge your car in 20, 30 minutes, especially if you can get 20 minutes from like 10% to 80%, right? Like that's going to really change things. And getting getting a lot more of those installed out there. I mean, that's coming. The ability to stream, putting them in locations where you do have some amenities, where some countries are like this, right? Like a convenience store gas station is kind of an experience. So you don't mind going, you kind of do other things while you're there. A lot of the industry is thinking about how do we make it okay for somebody to sit around for 20 minutes, especially on like a cross country trip type of thing. But none of that matters if the reliability isn't there. And everyone is acutely aware of that reliability piece is everything right now with the people we're talking with.
Since we're talking about wireless, I'd love to see, and I've seen this I saw it at CES and a couple other areas, which is wireless charging, inductive based charging, right? I think there's, we can do it on our phones today. Why not just, put the car on a charging platform and do some wireless based charging. I've even seen where they're doing some inductive charging on highways as well. They're trying this out in Germany, but that would be really cool. Now you don't have to stop to charge your vehicle, or if you do, you don't even have to get out of the vehicle, or if you have it at your home, maybe it's a new way to charge. But this inductive wireless based charging would be a really cool enhancement.
That's definitely something to picture for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's where like that sounds amazing, right? Especially built into the highways and all of that. I think we're probably a decade or two away from some of those things, and maybe even further, maybe never, just because the infrastructure requirements for things like that. The safety concerns with inductive charging, if anybody's ever gotten a paper clip put between their phone and their charger in their car, right? Like the technology is really cool. The safety, when you start, especially fast charging, you start talking about the amount of energy we're talking about a cable that has to be liquid cooled just so that it doesn't burn, it doesn't melt the rubber, right? We're talking about such incredible power.
It's just a dream.
But here's the good news is there are people working on that, right? And I think from an industry perspective, it's super exciting. Where I'm more encouraged is that reliability piece and just getting more of the technology that exists today. And I'm encouraged that is where the mentality is, because I mean, with all new technologies, right, it goes through this like phase of that's so cool and that's so amazing and look at everything that it can do. But it doesn't work all the time, right? And there's the early adopters that are okay with that. But to get the masses on board, you've really got to have that reliability built in. And I hope that's the next 5 years of EV charging, is solving that problem. Also, some of the regulatory things on being able to get higher power into more places. There's lots of roadblocks to EV charging companies to actually, it's like, please build more in our city. Okay, here's where we want to build. And they're like, no, you can't build them there, right? Like, so hopefully there's a lot of that stuff that's going to change over the next 5 to 10 years. But that reliability piece, I see that's something that can actually change in the next, 1 to 3 years and really help that transformation.
I agree. Well, we've taken up a lot of your guys' time today. Jeff and John, I really want to thank you for joining us to chat about the expansion of EV solutions. And before we close it out, Jeff, can you share more about where our listeners can find out about Core and the work that you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. Corewireless.com. Obviously, you can look up my name on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anyone there.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
Riso, this is a fun one to talk about because it is something that, although electric vehicles have been around for a while, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, we're really kind of at a point in time, like a tipping point, right? So the use is starting to flip. People are starting to move more rapidly into electric charging solutions. And so as a result, that industry is looking for new ways to improve their operational efficiencies and their reliability, as Jeff was mentioning.
Yeah, I think, this is more anecdotal, and I'm sure if I, use the old Google engine, I'm sure I could actually find surveys. But I do recall seeing quite a number of surveys that the barrier to people really thinking about electric vehicles is the charging infrastructure, right? You see article after article, blog post after blog post, Reddit thread after Reddit thread, talking about what the experience that John talked about, right? Going from charger to charger, not knowing whether it was going to be up or down, or, what level of charger it was and how much power it can deliver and how long it was going to take you to charge. And so that experience, more so than the distance that a vehicle can go, becomes the barrier to people wanting to move to EVs, because it's like gas stations are so ubiquitous that you don't worry necessarily. Now, if you go into a lot of rural areas or do a lot of like cross country or backcountry stuff, okay, maybe gas stations get fewer and far between. But for the most part, like, you can't go more than 5-10 minutes without passing a gas station, right? But the charging is not there. Again, the reliability of if a charger is there, is it going to work? Is it going to deliver enough power? Is it going to be the right kind of port? However, one of the interesting things for me in just listening to Jeff and John is like, I didn't realize how much goes into a charger, right? Is like, again, my background is networking, not electrical engineering. So it's like all the things that go into just being able to stand up a charger, let alone all the things that we're talking about as far as enabling the customer experience of being able to pay for it, being able to find a charger, being able to manage the charger. So like, just thinking through all the things that I think about from a network engineer perspective on delivering that customer service, that customer experience, just scratches the surface of all the things that they have to think about just to install the charger.
I think too that it's so important for manufacturers to understand that once they have all of their cellular ducks in a row, so to speak, they've got their equipment dialed in and they've got their connectivity dialed in, it's going to be so much easier for them to expand and meet a lot of these needs and challenges and hopes for innovation that are coming at them. And so having that solution in place is going to just absolutely be key for them.
Yeah. And then besides just, one of the things that we didn't touch on that I think plays into this, right, is we just talked about the failures of the charger just through the charger failing, right? Is there something wrong with the infrastructure, or maybe there's something wrong with the station, or maybe there's something wrong with the connectivity and they don't know about it. But the other piece that they also have to worry about is the vandalism, right? You see stories coming out of, especially larger cities where people are, vandalizing the station for the copper because, that is a source of thieves to get money, right? Or just people who, don't want to cast aspersions on anybody's political beliefs, but whether you believe or don't believe in climate change, tends to cause people to lash out at chargers as seeing them as a physical representation of the thing that they may be against. And so they vandalize them to prevent people from being able to utilize them. So, I think the other piece of that is not just knowing whether the charging is working, is they're going to have to take some security measures, more than just, like John said, like bad actors putting in malware, but physical security measures like cameras and other sensors to protect their investment, which obviously it's a large investment, against that vandalism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to know that once they have cellular in place, they can expand and protect their equipment, give their customers something that they'll want to keep coming back for, and just keep innovating. And that's kind of what we like to talk about with a lot of these episodes, right? Is cellular being the platform for future innovation. And if you enjoy those kind of chats and the chat that we had today with industry experts, share this podcast with a friend, please, and rate and subscribe to What's Your Signal wherever you listen to podcasts.